Today, the title of my sermon is The Emergence of the Great Mother. When I was in my early 20s and I had dropped out of Harvard, I was sharing an apartment in Cambridge with four other young women. We were all doing our best to make our way in the world. My rent was $90 a month for a tiny third floor room that was about 6 by 10 feet. I could see daylight between the roof slates through the ceiling of my closet. I learned from my housemates about tofu for the first time. We shopped at the food co-op that was in the basement of a building in Central Square. I rode my bike everywhere. Car ownership was never even a consideration. I had a job at the Dana greenhouses of the Arnold Arboretum, where I commuted on my bike in all weather, 6 miles each direction. The new Orange Line had not yet opened, and riding my bike was faster than any public transportation route. I was trying to figure out what direction to take in life. The greenhouse job taught me that plant science, an option I had been seriously considering, wasn't it. A fascination for sure, but not my calling. It was my women's singing group called Libana that showed me the way. The healing power of music forged in community was so compelling that I went on to get a degree in expressive therapies from Lesley College. The music therapy program at Berkeley didn't yet exist, or I certainly would have applied there. While I am most grateful that these beginning steps led me to the profession of clinical psychology, that's not actually the part I want to share with you today. Today, I'm sharing about the Divine Mother, the great cosmic womb, the formless, living void from which everything arises. It was in Libana and in the feminist community more generally that I learned about our cultural history of the goddess, often named Sophia in Western and Near Eastern traditions. I had certainly heard of goddesses in the Greek and Roman traditions, Hera and Athena and Venus, but they were labeled myths and they were always behaving badly. So I took them as stories that immature humanity used to tell each other, never imagining their past power. The goddess had not been so utterly lost in African traditions as she has been in the Western tradition. Consider Yamaya in the Yoruba religion, the great goddess of creation and of water, who has been continuously praised in Brazil ever since Africans were forcibly brought there by the Portuguese in the 15th century. I learned some of the multitude of names for the goddess used in the Near East, Isis and Astarte and Ishtar. I learned about Brigantia and Cailleach and Rhiannon and Sequana and Sulis in the Celtic tradition. I learned about Durga and Kali and Parvati and Sarasvati in the Hindu tradition. I could go on. There are quite literally thousands of names for the feminine divine. She is generally associated with nature, water and earth, birth and death. I learned that people in Neolithic Europe were worshiping the goddess 40,000 years ago, at least 40,000 years ago. That's just the age of the oldest sculpture that has been dug up. Who knows what she was called back then, but her name is probably contained as the root of sounds that have morphed through time and became names we still know today. This information was mind-blowing to me. Raised in a Protestant church, I was deprived of a relationship with Mother Mary. She'd been mentioned, of course, but more so in the form of a child wearing a blue bedsheet in our Christmas pageant, rather than as the enlightened being I have since learned that she was, and still is, I might add. I had been taught that the Catholics had it all wrong to be talking to Mother Mary. Jesus was the only star of our show, and of course, God was a he, our Father who art in heaven. I experienced knowing that there is a vast panoply of names for the feminine divine as an enormous relief. If only she could be restored. There was some hope of reintegrating her much needed energies, starting with respect for the Mother Earth, whose entire complex and miraculous web of life holds our very existence. How is it ever possible that Western culture became so identified with intellect and so disconnected from Mother Earth that we could abuse her for short term gains? I was quite touched by Reverend Carlos's recent Mother's Day message about loving Gaia as the great mother we all share. In Labana, my singing group, we sang medieval praise songs to the shining star of the sea. We sang modern day chants to the earth as our mother. We sang contemporary folk songs praising women. We sang walking songs that women used to keep themselves going while pounding the tweed they had woven in the Hebrides. At the heart of it all, we were singing ourselves into valuing ourselves as women, restoring a sense of dignity that had been lost, living in a culture that elevates white men of financial means. That is all changing now, finally. Yes, change is challenging, but the rewards are great. We get to honor the earth and all her beings, to respect our feelings as guides to how we feel about things, and to trust our intuition, the most deeply divine feminine way of knowing. I would like to be clear that a healthy person has balanced and integrated their masculine and feminine qualities. This has nothing to do with sex or gender identity. This is about having honored and integrated our receptive and active qualities, our ability to connect in relationship, and our confidence to express our individuated selves. My friend Teresa, who trusts her intuition and has had a strong connection with Sophia for many years, recently received this message in meditation. I am announcing the mother's return to Earth. You will begin to see her in many people. I will begin embodying her in all who are willing to receive me. Are you willing? Then let us begin our journey together. You must realize the time is now. With the coming earth changes, the need for your mother's love is paramount for humanity, not only to survive, but thrive. Yes, it is time for humanity to begin thriving again. The old is letting go, being dismantled and disappearing. The new will feel different, more aligned, more natural. This is how you will know. When you hold my energy, you will allow those around you to begin to align, to look within. Let us begin to align ourselves. Create a space in your heart for me. Sit in silence and feel my energy enter into your heart, mind, and body. Let us speak together. I'd like to tell you about a recent news item. In mid-May, a swarm of bees appeared above the lawn of the White House. In some ways, this is normal behavior for bees in the springtime. A new queen is nurtured, and when she emerges, she leaves with half the worker bees to find a new home. But I see that their approach to the White House has spiritual significance. Since early Mesopotamian civilization, the bee has been a symbol of the goddess. There are many ancient depictions of priestesses tending bees and collecting honey. In Greek, the name Melissa means honeybee, and as a name for women, it means the priestess who tends the honeybees. This symbolic wisdom was carried throughout medieval Europe. A church I visited in southwestern France, the region of the Cathars, has two statues high up on its facade, Mary Magdalene on the left and Yeshua on the right, each given completely equal billing. And Mother Mary is high above at the peak of the roof. All of that was amazing enough. Talk about balance and integration of the divine feminine and divine masculine, all held within the Great Mother. But I also noticed there were a lot of bees around. So I looked up to see where they were coming from. They were flying in and out of a hole in Magdalene's belt. The sculptor had clearly built a space for a hive inside of the statue. There have probably been bees living there for several hundred years. Clearly, the sculptor was aware of the statement they were making. They were providing a home for the representation of the goddess on earth inside the body of Magdalene, who had learned to embody her divinity and was loved and revered by the people in that region where she had lived for many years. A passage in my book reveals the inner meaning of the bee, much to my surprise. These are words I spoke while I was in a light trance at the end of a regression hypnosis session. I see a bee, and the eye of the bee, with its infinite facets, as the representation on earth of God. The bee is in communion with other bees. They create this beautiful geometry, and they create food from the beauty of the flowers. The bee is the perfection of God, all of it, each facet of its eye, each hair that collects each grain of pollen, the whole hive, their knowledge of the energy patterns that guide them to fly to the flowers, all of it is God. I see the geometric pattern of everything. Everything is in a pattern, and it's all the same, just different manifestations. Women were respected inside the church in the early church, in the early medieval times. And the divine feminine was respected, but only in that cloistered place, not out in the world. You had to go inside the wall to be respected. And now, being female in the world is especially important. No harm can come to me because now I know who I am. Now I see the light is connected to itself. The source of the light cannot be separated from its emanation. The knowledge is already there in the heart. There's nothing to figure out. The mind is the servant of the knowledge in the heart. I understand that now. The mind is the servant of the knowledge in the heart. I understand. The knowledge of love in my heart is all that's required. So back to the bees swarming the White House. The divine feminine is making herself known. She's coming out into the open, as my friend Teresa received. I have spoken several times recently about the new earth, whose dawning has already started. She's not challenging the darkness. There's no battle. She is simply and powerfully becoming known. I'd like to conclude with a quote from the first chapter of the Gospel of John, verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Amen. Amen. Amen.